Folks, this is Steve Sanson, Jim Jones with Veterans in Politics. Today we have Maria Gall, candidate for Clark County District Court Department 9, and also appointed to that position of judge. And I just want to make a disclaimer that Timothy Treffinger is a sponsor of this show, but is not endorsed by any guest on the show. Anybody that wants to sponsor the show, more than happy to have you. Just let us know and we'll have you sponsor the show as well. So it's not just one person sponsoring. We could have a multiple of people sponsoring. So just let us know and we'd be more than happy to have you sponsor the show as well. Jim, you have any rants?
Not really. I mean, we were, me and Ms. Gall were already talking about the flooding. So I already touched on water the last time. So I don't really have any rants. I'm really happy about the two guests today because these are both races that people don't pay enough attention to. And I mean, I'm not going to beat the same drum. I mean, Steve, you said it forever. And thanks to Steve, Steve's the one that got me to actually like really pay attention to judicial races, and not just judicial races, but then how the courts work, specifically, all the garbage that goes on in family court. And then he kind of unleashed a monster because then now everybody teases me and they say, "Are you a lawyer?" Just by the way I talk, I'm like, no, I'm not a lawyer. I'm just very interested in court cases now.
Judge Gall.
Yes, Steve.
Tell us about you.
All right. So a little bit of background. I am the daughter of a Korean immigrant. Okay. And the daughter and the stepdaughter of career U.S. Army enlisted servicemen. Okay. My mom worked as a hotel housekeeper, cashier checker. My dad was a tanker, 1st of the 12th Cav, stationed in Fort Knox for most of his career. My stepfather taught at the Armor School, and these are the people in my life who taught me the value of hard work. It's because of them and the sacrifices that they made that I was able to go to college, that I was able to go to law school, that I was able to have the career that I have today. And in fact, it's the reason I'm able to campaign right now, because while I'm here on this show, my mom is watching my kid. And so they continue.
How old is your child?
She's 2. She's
What's her
2
name?
years old. I'd like to not publicly announce that if that's okay.
Yeah. Well, what do you call her? What was her nickname?
I call her JoJo. JoJo. Okay. So, it's because of that. And they continue to make sacrifices for me. And I know I'm not alone. A lot of people, a lot of your listeners out there, the reason they're able to do what they do is because of the sacrifices their friends and family have made. Mm-hmm. And so a bit more about me. I started my practice in what's called complex commercial litigation. Mm-hmm. It means that I represented businesses for the most part, but I represented all kinds of businesses, from mom and pop shops to corporations. I represented people who owned businesses, people who invested in businesses, people who also managed businesses. And I think that gave me a unique perspective because I not only understand businesses, I understand the consumers, mm-hmm. the employees, and the communities that businesses impact. I think, Steve, you mentioned I was appointed to the bench. I was appointed to the bench after a rigorous interview, application, and selection process by the Judicial Selection Commission. And then the governor appointed me about 30 days ago. So I've actually only been on the bench for a few weeks.
How long was that interview with Governor Sisolak?
The interview was about, I think, somewhere between 7-10 minutes.
Oh, wow. He's gotten faster.
And, I'll say this. I think one of the reasons is because I think the governor surrounds himself with good people who are very attuned to the judicial selection process. And so I think he does a lot of background work on the candidates beforehand, or rather the nominees beforehand. Right. I can tell you, he read my full file during the interview. He knew all of my letters of recommendation. He knew my references. He knew everything that was in my application. And Steve, I know you've seen that application. It's long.
It is.
It's long. It's detailed. It's single space. I meant to actually pull it up. And to the viewers here, I'll tell you one thing that's unique about me from those who are going to be running against me is that you can find my application online. You can Google it. It's publicly available. And it's probably, the public portion is probably about, 30 pages single space. It has my work history in there. It has my educational history. It has things that I consider important. And I think it should also have a writing sample in there so you can see what I wrote like as a lawyer.
That's interesting. You know what? I think that anybody that runs for judicial seats should go through the whole process.
The vetting process.
The vetting process, absolutely. Because isn't there a psychological background in there as well?
There is a non-public portion of the application that does ask about your medical history. That does include a mental health component. And so you do have to disclose that. And then there's also a background check that's done. For instance, I had to go down, I had to get digitally fingerprinted, and I had to sign a waiver so that the state could conduct a criminal. Well, I assume it's all sorts of background check. I shouldn't just limit it to criminal.
Right. Judge Gall, why Gall?
Correct.
Okay. What do you want to be a judge? Weren't you in private practice?
I was in private practice. I was with a national law firm, 650 attorneys. I was in their Las Vegas office, which is considerably smaller, about 10 to 12 attorneys, depending on how you count them. But the reason I want to be a judge, it really at bottom boils down to this, Steve. I've always wanted, because of how I grew up, because I had, a dad and a stepdad who gave back to this country, I'd always wanted to give back to public service. And in fact, that was going to be my goal when I came out of law school. I wanted to go to a nonprofit. And somebody very wise said to me, they said, Maria, with your background, with how you did in law school, you should go to private practice. Go to private practice and let the private industry train you up, because nonprofits and the public industry, the public sector, they are so busy. They don't always have time to devote to training. So you're fortunate, go get trained up, practice for a while, and then come back, either go to the public sector or go to the nonprofit sector. And that's what I did. And, frankly, it probably took me a little bit longer than I would have liked to have done. I was in private practice for about 15, 16 years before I left. But, I came back.
All that is in Nevada?
No, not all of it's in Nevada. I started my career, my legal career. I clerked for a federal judge in Kentucky. I went to New York and practiced about 4 or 5 years with a law firm called Cadwalader, Wickersham and Taft.
New York City?
New York City.
Which borough?
Manhattan.
Oh, wow.
We were located at not quite Wall Street, but One World Financial Center.
Okay, I know where that is.
In Battery Park City.
I'm a New Yorker.
Yeah, so I practiced there for about 4 or 5 years. It's the longest continuously run law firm in the United States. And with a name like that, Cadwalader, Wickersham and Taft, you've got to believe that.
Taft rings a bell.
Yes, Taft
the other
should
two
ring.
not so much, but
that means they're a multi-million-dollar law firm.
Right.
I left the practice for a little while to go to academia. I taught at my alma mater as what's called a visiting assistant professor of law, and I taught business. I taught international human rights law, and I taught professional ethics.
Okay.
But then
professional ethics.
Or legal ethics. People call it different things: professional responsibility, legal ethics, so on and so forth. But it's a class that's taught at, I think, every law school, because, as you probably know, attorneys, they not only have to pass the bar, they have to pass the legal ethics test as a component of getting into the bar. So I did that. I found out academia was not the right fit for me. And I went back to the practice of law in Kentucky. And then I eventually made it out here in 2016. And when I came out here, I didn't know really what to expect, right? Because it's the first time living on the West Coast. And frankly, I don't even know if you would consider Las Vegas part of the West Coast as a part of, as opposed to, the mountain states, right? But I came out here, guys, I loved it. Nevada and Las Vegas and Clark County. I'll tell you what, it's because you don't have to be a fifth, sixth, 10th generation name out here, to make a life for yourself. You can come out here, you can be a small business owner, you can be an entrepreneur, you can be a professional, you can work in the hospitality industry, and you can make a very good life for yourself and for your family. And I loved that spirit about Nevada, but in particular, I love that spirit about Clark County. And so I thought to myself, why would anybody leave here? And frankly, Steve, that's what drove me back to public service. It's that I love this community and I wanted to be a part of making this bench reflect what a great community and a great state and a great city this is.
Bravo.
Yeah. It's true.
It's interesting the way you put it. Just real quick. What my mom, people always used to ask my mom what she loved about Las Vegas so much, and the way she broke it down, just real simple. She said, because in Las Vegas, you can live in whatever lane you want, and you can switch that lane at any time of the day. She said, you can live in suburbia and you can just sit back on your couch and watch TV and relax if that's your thing. If you want to go out, do stuff, be a little more active, be like in the middle lane, you can do that too if you want to be in the fast lane. And you can be in the fast lane at any time of day if you want to. And she said that was the unique thing about Vegas. And that's why when my dad talked about moving to California, she said, we're not leaving Las Vegas and I will not raise my kids in California. So we stayed.
I like Las Vegas because you don't have Nevada, because same in Reno, you don't have your hands handcuffed. If you want to go to a club on a Tuesday night, you go to a club on Tuesday night. You want sushi at 4 a.m, you can go get sushi at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a very independent spirit, I think, that drives this state. And that's one of the other reasons I love it. And in fact, you were talking about your mom. My mom was only supposed to be out here to help me out during campaign season. But guess what? On Thursday, she closed on a house because she came out here and in 3 months, she decided this is going to be the place for her and my stepdad to live. And what attracted her to this city was not only the wealth of, food and activities that the city offers, it's that it is an incredibly diverse community. Yes, and she loved that about Las Vegas. It reflects the nation that we are.
What do you feel about the Veterans Treatment Court?
I'll be honest with you, I'm not overly familiar with it because I don't participate in the Veteran Treatments Court, but as a conceptual matter, right? As a conceptual matter, I would have to say, I support it and all the specialty courts that we have, because it's not just the Veterans Treatments Court. But, what I understand about the Veterans Treatment Court is that, there's two components. There's one in Justice Court, which is not where I'm at. And then there's also there's a component that does exist in District Court for certain non-violent, non-sex offender felonies. And my understanding is that you can get placed into, whether you're in Justice Court or whether you're in a nonviolent felony offense in District Court, you can go through the program of the Veterans Court. It is a huge commitment. I believe it's about a year.
18 months, I think.
Pretty much, you have to go to counseling. You have to show that you're making progress. You have to show that you're committed. And in recognition of the unique circumstances and the unique challenges that our servicemen and women and our veterans face, the concept is that Veterans Treatment Court is an alternative to the regular process. And so that concept I fully support. What I don't have in front of me and what I would like to know is I would actually like statistics, because Steve, I'm a statistics guy, because unless the numbers are wrong, numbers typically don't lie. Right. So I'd like to see what the success rates are in Veterans Treatment Court, because we should always be reevaluating the things we do. And if the success rates are not as high as we would like, and this is, by the way, from me speaking, I don't know what the success rates are right now, then we should obviously revisit and make sure we make tweaks to it. And we should get feedback from the people and from the people who take a part of that court and the lawyers who get their clients into treatment in that court. We should always be seeking to improve.
Your calendar, is it civil or criminal or both?
My calendar currently is all civil.
Okay. And that's your background?
That is my background. It could switch at some point because the chief judge, and our chief judge right now is Jerry Weiss. The chief judge.
We've known him for like ever.
Yes.
For a long time.
Before he even took the bench.
Yeah. The chief, so Judge Weiss decides how dockets are allocated, for lack of a better term. But he gave me an all civil docket. And this is a little bit of speculation on my part, but I think it was in part because of my background and because we have an incredible backlog right now on the civil cases because of COVID, because cases for a very long time were not going to trial. And even when they were going to trial, there would be mistrials because you would have 1, 2, sometimes 3 people, get COVID and you would run out of your alternate jurors.
Yeah. How do you feel about court observers in your courtroom?
Well, they're allowed. That's the cornerstone of our court system, right? We have a free and open court system. Now, sometimes you have to close off your court. There are sometimes very sensitive issues that come before the court. But I think it's rare that you need to close the court off entirely, but court observers are allowed. And one good thing that came out of COVID and the courts having to kind of reinvent themselves, so to speak, is that we have Blue Jeans now, right? And so my Blue Jeans link is on my department guidelines. So it's publicly available. You can log in anytime. You don't have to put your name. You can put yourself as observer number 1 or as observer number 50 or observer whatever you would like. But we have a free and open system.
So Blue Jeans offered the court observation as well?
That absolutely. Okay. Blue Jeans is open to everyone. Okay. So in many ways, moving towards a more technologically accessible court has enabled more people to observe courts.
What's your favorite constitution?
My favorite amendment, my favorite provision.
No, I always say that.
And it's like, because most people just pick it up, and I'm not correct.
I like the Nevada Constitution. Would you like me to choose
That's what
a state?
I was going to say, the Nevada versus the federal one.
I think I
Your
would have to say, this is a close call. This is like if I had more than one kid, it would be like asking me to choose my favorite kid, right? True. Because so many of the amendments, they serve a different process in our democracy, right? And I'm not trying to avoid the question. I'm trying to think through it. The first, my gut reaction is the First Amendment, right? Because the First Amendment and I think people back in the day thought it was pretty important too, right? Because it's the First Amendment and it's the cornerstone of all the other amendments, right? A free and open society where you have the right to, I should say this more specific, where the government cannot restrain your speech unreasonably, where you have the right to protest, where you have the right to gather, right? That's one of the cornerstones of our democracy, the first cornerstone of our democracy. But there are other amendments that are important, the due process amendments, right? Because they protect our rights. They ensure.
Is it the 14th?
Yes. And they ensure that we go through a fair process through our courts, right? And that you can't be railroaded through our courts. So that's tough.
About the 7th?
It's all the amendments are great, Steve, but I think, even those were the 2 that immediately came to mind. But I think if you're going to tell me, Maria, I want you to choose one, I think I have to come back to the first because even in thinking through that, I'm thinking you have to have, before you can have anything else, you have to have a free and open society.
We had a congressional candidate said it was because I asked the same questions.
I was thinking.
He said the second because it takes care of the rest.
Well, no, he said it to be. I think he said the first and the second takes care of the rest.
Yeah.
I can see, yeah, I can see that perspective.
Funny. If you do have a criminal docket,
Sure.
do you plan to visit the CCDC and?
I think it's very important, especially because I don't have a criminal law background, for me to get, if I get a criminal docket, to get as educated as possible, right? About the processes, about people who are involved in the criminal justice system, because too often, let me back up. The job that I have to do, I have to get decisions right. Now, I won't get all of the decisions right because I'm a human being and people make mistakes. And that's why we have our appellate courts. We have two appellate courts, in fact. But my goal is always to get decisions right. And I think the way you get decisions right is through education. And so, as I was saying, because my background isn't in criminal law, if I'm going to get a criminal docket, you can darn well be sure I'm going to educate myself as much as possible so that I understand the process, I understand the laws, but then I also understand the system that surrounds the laws, because it's not just about the process and the laws. It is about the jail system. It is about the prison system. It is about our police officers. It is about the attorneys and the public defenders who defend people who come before the courts. And so I think it's very important to have a fulsome and meaningful understanding of all components of the criminal justice system.
Are you familiar with the Hope for Prisoner program?
I am familiar with the Hope for Prisoner program. And in fact, I gave the oath last week.
Oh, beautiful.
Yes. And that's an incredible program that's been started. And in fact, they have had such incredible success rates. And while I don't have the statistics before me, what I do know is that other programs around the country are trying to model themselves, given the success of the program that we've had right here in Nevada.
Are you the type of judge start on time?
Yes.
Tell everybody they better have all their stuff together? Are you that type of judge? Because there's some judges that hour later, they'll come on the bench.
No. So I start on time. And in fact, if you could see what's going on, like in the back of the courtroom, right? Mm-hmm. What you would see is I am sitting there in a chair, mm-hmm. waiting for my marshal to call me. So I'm waiting, 5 minutes before. I'm robed up because my regular calendar starts at 9. So 5 minutes before, I'm robed up, I'm sitting in that chair, I've got my stack of files in front of me.
What color's your robe?
Black.
Okay. Because they have blue and all kinds of colors.
There were a lot of choices when I got fitted for my robe. I chose black.
Okay. Why?
We're getting a little sidetracked here, but here's why. So I don't know if you've seen.
People say I confuse the guests sometimes. I go from one thing to the other,
we'll
back again.
We'll come back to the timing thing. Okay. I try not to forget these things, but here's why. They actually say people make worse choices when they have too many options. Okay.
That is true.
This is very true.
Yeah, there's data on this. People make worse choices when there's too many options. And I'm going to tell you, there were too many options and colors. And so I did not want to make a poor choice in a color. And so I just defaulted to black.
I'm good.
Right?
Let's just go traditional. Leave it at that.
I've seen all the colors. That's
right. That's right. No, there are a lot of colors. And you may not know this. It's not just colors. There are styles of robes, okay? And
the little frill.
Yeah, no, this is true. And there are materials. There had to have been a dozen different materials.
Wow.
Yeah. So there were
polyester, wool,
silk. I can't actually remember the material that I chose, but there's materials, there's weights, there's colors, there's styles. So I went with black, but. So you'll see me, now I'm coming back, you'll see me sitting in that black robe in the chair, and I'm waiting for my marshal to call me. The only time I will take the bench later than 9, and it would only be a few minutes after 9, is because we're waiting for the attorneys to get into the courtroom. If I know I'm going to be late, for instance, I had what's called a special setting where it's not calendar call, where I had scheduled the attorneys specifically to come in. I had a scheduling misconception error where I knew the thing I had before that time, I was likely going to be about 10 or 15 minutes late. So I had my JEA call the attorneys and say, like, look, we're really sorry. We know we set you at 2:00. Is there any way you could, accommodate the court at 2:30 because we don't want to keep you waiting. And I think that's really important because I was just in private practice, Steve, a month ago. And so I know what it's like. You're busy. You are, if you're charging by the hour, you're charging that time to your client. And I don't want that. I don't want to waste somebody's time. And I don't want, them to have to charge their client merely because I'm 10 or 15 minutes late.
That brings up a question I have about attorneys, because I have noticed that too, that the majority of the time that a court starts late or gets held up is because the attorneys are late. So, what is there anything a judge can do, disciplinary wise or whatever, to tell these attorneys? Because I won't pick on an attorney I had in the past, but always late.
So
Always late.
Some attorneys are late, and I didn't mean, by the way, to say that pejoratively. Let me give you a different perspective.
Okay.
While I'm having calendar call on Wednesdays and Thursdays,
right,
a lot of other departments, and remember, there's 32 departments, I think, are having calendar call on Wednesdays and Thursdays. And these attorneys are hopping around from calendar call to calendar call because that's the system we have. We don't do special settings, and we try to give oral argument. And so sometimes the attorneys are perceived late when in fact what's happening is that they're trying to balance and juggle between the different calendar calls. And we appreciate that. We understand that. And what we ask is, hey, if you've got a calendar call in Department 11, check in with us. Just let us know. We'll accommodate that. And we'll wait. In fact, we'll wait around. If I've ended my calendar and that attorney is still waiting around in Department 11, we'll just say, call my JEA. We'll get back on the bench.
Okay, good. I'm glad you do that as well, because I actually had that happen once where they actually did call my attorney and they waited a little while for my attorney to come in. I didn't know why. I wasn't upset with the attorney because he was a really good attorney for me and did a really good job. But I was like, this guy's always late. And I never understood why, but he'd come, I got held up.
He gets held up. He gets held up in court. He gets held up with other clients. Right. That's not the ideal system, but unfortunately, it's the system that we're living with. But the way I look at it is I have a constituency, and the constituency I see every day are the attorneys and sometimes the parties. And so we are here to serve the attorneys and the parties. And it's the same way. Sometimes I have attorneys that did not realize that they were in front of me. We call them. We try to call them.
Yeah, because they called mine too. So cool.
So what do you look for in, because you have a marshal.
Yes.
You have a JEA,
yes,
Judicial Executive Assistant, and you have a law clerk.
Correct.
What do you look for in those three staff?
And, I have two additional, well, you missed two more. I have a court recorder. Okay. And I have a court clerk.
Assigned to you?
Yes.
Okay.
So I have a court. They are all.
What about the audio video? You don't use that as well, or use that in conjunction with the court recorder?
With both.
Okay.
So I have a court clerk and a court recorder. Okay. And then I have my law clerk. I have my JEA. And then I have my marshal. And so the JEA, the court recorder, and the law clerk, I hire. Okay. And the marshal and the court clerk come from the, colloquially, the marshal's pool and the clerk's pool.
But you pick?
Not necessarily.
They pick for you?
They will assign someone to you. And then, it's a free country. If it's not the right fit, I think really quickly, and then they may get assigned to somebody else. Right. And in the same way, you remember how I was saying 3 of my staff work, I hire them. The marshal and the court clerk, because they come from the pool, they can be assigned out at any time. Like, so for instance, if I'm not in trial or I'm not in court, my marshal can be asked to go to another courtroom where they might be having a trial. Same thing with my court clerk. If I'm not in trial or something, she can be asked to do some work for another matter in another department. But my JEA, my court recorder, and my law clerk are always with me. So what do I look for? And I look for, obviously I look for people who are competent, threshold. Sometimes we forget about how important I think competence is. So I look for people who are competent, who are good at their job. And then I look for people who I think can get along all together, because a lot of people don't realize this is kind of a lonely job, right? In a law firm, if you're not a solo practitioner and you're in a law firm, you have your colleagues around you all the time. With a judge, a lot of times it's just me and my staff. And so we're a tight-knit group. And so I want to make sure that everyone gets along, that we have the same goals in mind, that they understand what my goals for my courtroom is, and that they're there to support me. And really my goals are to serve, the constituents. And so that's what I look for in my staff, whether it's the people I hire or it's the people who are assigned to me.
Before former Judge Richard Scotti took the bench, he asked me to be his marshal.
He did.
And I respectfully had to turn him down. He said I'd have to give up veterans in politics.
You would.
And I just did not want to do that.
Yeah, well, I will tell you right now, I think they're hiring for the marshals. Yeah. So if anybody out there is interested in being a marshal, I think that announcement was posted a couple of days ago.
I have my hands handcuffed to being a marshal. I don't want to do that yet. So, Jim, do you have anything else for Judge Gall?
I do have one question, because I like the fact that, see how I phrase it. I like the fact that you went through the appointment process, because there's still the debate, right? And we know that according to the state law, that judges get elected. So I'm not going to ask you whether you think they should be elected or appointed. Okay. But I like the fact of, I'll just say my personal thing. I think that we should, and remove and retain helps with that, is we need to start progressing to a point where I like Missouri. I think it works. I think it's a good idea to have attorneys have to go through an appointment process in order to become a judge, and then have the people vote to retain. I think that is, I honestly think that's a better system, because, there's going to be some shenanigans on both sides, whether it's elected or not. I just think it leads better to people that are making the decisions on whether somebody's qualified to be a judge or not are probably a little more qualified.
Can I ask you a question? Mm-hmm. Are there other offices other than judicial offices where you would institute the same type of system?
I've actually been asked that question a couple times, and it's a fair question. As of right now, I would say no. I would say I think term limits actually help with that, with the other seats. I think that, that's just my personal opinion. I think that I think there has been some people that are concerned about an appointment by the governor. Would the governor have enough legal background to know who would make a good judge or not?
Okay.
And I think I like the fact that I know gets beat up a lot, Governor Sisolak, and there's a lot of things about Governor Sisolak I don't care for, but I do know that he does his homework, and he really knows he researches stuff before he makes decisions.
Yeah, I fully believe that with his judicial appointments that he seeks a lot of advice. Yeah. He reads the file fully, and then he makes an independent decision based on how he feels the merits of the candidate, or rather the nominee, are.
So it'll be interesting if you win election or to stay on the bench, if we'll have you back and see which process you thought was better.
Well, I would love to be back.
I know what the answer is going to be. That's why it's kind of funny because Steve's kind of like, well, that's not a question, and because they're doing your own interview. Because I've asked judges this before, and they always just say it's state law.
It is. It is state law.
They don't really answer, and I understand. As a judge, you guys are in a unique situation where you do have to follow. Well, hopefully, you follow the judicial canons, and you understand like what you can and cannot say. And
no, but I appreciate your perspective because I think it's really important. Judges are constrained from things that we can say, right? Yeah. And we do have to follow the law and apply the law. And I am a judge. By the way, my judicial philosophy is that I apply the law as it's written. But it's still helpful to hear constituent perspectives.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important for judges to listen to their constituents, to hear their constituents, and to understand the position that their constituents are coming from.
Then the one last question I have for you then, when you were in private practice, so most of it was business law. So, because, there's another perception out there that when you're in private practice, if you're a defense attorney, you're going to be easier on criminals. And if or someone accused of a crime, and if you're worked as a prosecutor, then you're going to be tougher. So I was just wondering what your background was on as far as did you do more defense work or prosecutor work, or with the business stuff, it didn't really matter?
So for some business attorneys, you are on one side or another, but it's not so much plaintiff or defendant. Right. It's more, are you representing management versus owners? That's one way of looking at it, right? For me, I was unique and a little bit of I like to consider a little bit of a unicorn in what I did because I did both. I represented owners, I represented investors, but I also represented management, often, directors and officers. And one of the reasons is because my firm allowed that. My firm saw it as all of just business litigation. And because it's business litigation and it's business disputes, we didn't have to exclusively represent one side or another. And because of that, I actually gained a unique perspective that a lot of attorneys from my background who go to the bench don't have. I did contingency fee cases, right? A lot of attorneys, if they go to the bench with only a business background, they've never done a contingency fee case. Whereas I've done contingency fee work, and that's unique because I understand how those cases work, and I understand what drives those cases.
Nice. One thing we didn't touch on, though, just for viewers and listeners, I think sometimes Steve and I forget to ask these questions because we've done so many of these interviews. Can you explain to the viewers and listeners that don't understand the difference between civil and a criminal calendar?
Okay. Civil case, so I'll just start, and I apologize if this is too basic, but civil cases, at least in my court, are those cases that are greater than $15,000. And so it's going to be your personal injury cases, such as car accidents, medical malpractice, slip and falls, also called premises liability, breach of contract cases, which could be, for instance, non-payment of loan cases. You might have some real estate disputes in my court, but those are kind of a hodgepodge, so to speak, of civil cases. And those are the cases that I exclusively have right now. Criminal cases, at least in district court, are your felony cases, right? So they would be your assaults. They would be your batteries. They would be your manslaughters. They would be your sexual offenses. And so those would be on the criminal calendar.
Okay. Yeah, because I think sometimes Steve and I take for granted that the viewers and listeners understand some of the stuff we already know.
Well, the other things for your viewers to understand is, remember how I said I like statistics? 75% of the cases that are filed in district court are not criminal cases. They're civil cases. And so if you are interested in your judges, I think that's one thing to pay attention to is that most of the cases that come through district court are not criminal cases. They're civil cases. And for most viewers and most constituents, if they do end up in court, and let's hope they don't, right? Because I kind of look at court as a last resort. They're most likely going to be in court in a civil dispute. And so part of looking at judicial races, I think, is not just understanding the judges and their qualifications, but also understanding how our court systems work and how our court systems are structured.
And then and asking those questions like what kind of docket they have.
Exactly. What kind of docket they have, what kind of docket could they get, but also, you asked a very important question. How do you feel about court observers? It's a very important question to pose to our court system and to understand our court system.
Years ago, we had about 32 of the district court judges at Canyon Springs High School to talk to the public. This was when all the judges were going to be up at the same time. And I believe that was the only time that many judges, because marshals brought in bomb sniffing dogs and the whole 9 yards.
That was a cool event.
That was the first time there was so many judges outside of the courthouse in a different structure. And we had shadow a judge program with the high school students that would come and sit in the courtroom for a day, or sit up with the judges for a day and just watch how everything works, how the judicial system works. And we kind of let that program go by the wayside. And matter of fact, Canyon Springs has a mock courtroom inside their building. I believe Judge Weiss has been there a few times as well. In fact, he was at the program we had years ago. How do you feel about the Shadow Judge program with high school students just observing for a day what you do and, follow you around the whole day?
I think that's great. I think it's part of having an open judicial system and also part of being educated. Not only do I need to be educated, but I think, our community, including, our high school students, need to be educated about our judicial system and see what it's like and see what the job is actually like. They might be disappointed at how unexciting at times my job is. I do a lot of reading. But I think that's important to learn about, the story of our judges, how we got to the bench, how we work the bench, and then what our departments are like. So I would welcome that program being reinstated, but even outside of that program, if somebody wants to visit me in my courtroom and learn about my department, I'm welcome that person to call my JEA and set up an appointment.
Okay. You didn't go to Boyd, right?
I did not go to Boyd. I went to the University of Kentucky.
That's right. Okay. Jim, do you have anything else for Judge Gall?
No, I don't. I just want to thank you for coming on, and thank you for getting appointed to be a judge and now running to get elected to be a judge. I think it's I'm going to steal Steve's line. Judges impact your decision will impact that person's life immediately. And people need to really take the judiciary seriously. And I appreciate your dedication to the judiciary. It's a very important role in our country.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you so much for those kind words, and thank you for having me on today and giving me your time.
Judge Gall, could you look into the camera? Mark's going to zoom in on you, and you could tell folks, go to the voting booth, vote for you, or whatever you want to say, and your point of contact, please.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Judge Gall here. I will be on your November ballot to retain my seat. I hope I can earn your vote, earn your support. What I say is that every litigant that comes before me will get a fair shake in my courtroom because I apply the law with integrity and with honesty. I do hope I can earn your support. If you have any questions about me, my contact information is on my website. That's www.mariagall.com. You can email me at any time at maria@mariagall.com. If you have questions, I do hope you reach out to me. And I do hope that you pay attention to the down ballot judicial races this November. Thanks for having me on, Steve.
Gall, thank you so much for coming on the program. Folks, that's Judge Maria Gall, candidate for Clark County District Court, Department number 9. This is Steve Sanderson, Jim Jones for Veterans in Politics. Until next time.